We're ready to get started. So tonight, first of all, there's a lot of people in here that I had sent email invitations to, and also board members here, so I really appreciate you guys being here. I hope that in whatever way you're comfortable with staying engaged, you do, because it's going to be important for us, I think, to get feedback, not from people just in the district, but also from community members. If there's anybody that you think you want to invite to this, I'm happy to send them an email. You're more than welcome to invite them yourself. This is a public meeting, and I think we're just going to have some more success with having members of the community here if we're one-on-one saying, hey, I think you should come out to this. So I just encourage anybody to do that. I would love to get to a point where we don't have to meet here, we have to meet in a bigger room. That would be wonderful. On that note, the first topic on the agenda that we're going to talk about this evening is a switch of financial institutions, which is something that the district does every few years, and we're going to be talking about the impact that it would have on staff to do it at this point in time. So I'm going to turn over to Ann.
And Elena, feel free to chime in. The last time we did an RFP for bank services was in 2016, and it was for a 3-year agreement. We had an extension for this year. So you actually have brought this up, should we consider asking for, or what should we do at this juncture? So if we did an RFP, we would have to write it in the spring, issue it, and the change would take place in 2021. Just looking at your items here, historic consequence, we've had very good experience with PNC, Pennsylvania School District Asset Fund. They are very supportive in terms of controlling fraud. They also have cash flow optimization tools where our money is invested 100% of the time. The district's money, taxpayers' money is invested 100% of the time. We also have a fee-free structure, which the results showed that in the last RFP, net earnings after banking fees, they came out on top. Some of the so we really haven't had a bad experience with them at all. It's a very positive experience. Change in a bank depository is very time consuming. It can take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months from the time, going through the results and then implementing it alone could take up to 3 months, changing over. And what our concern at this point, Elaine and I, it's a real big concern, is that we have at least 3 people in the business office who will be retiring this year, by the end of the year, or early next year. And making such a significant change in operations with new people, would cause, it's just not how you do things.
Yeah.
Because your focus really should be on getting them to understand our process, our current banking process, and controls in place so that when, if you ever had to change again, they can support. You're just setting yourself up for mistakes. Doing something like that with new people. So our course of action would be to delay it, to see if our current relationship, they would extend it with the same terms. What we would prefer at this point, because I believe it's in the best interest of the district in terms of investments, controlling fraud, etc., and keeping us sane. To put it blunt.
Do board members have any questions about anything that Ann talked about?
Are there any other criteria that you look at when you're kind of considering banking services?
The memo that I shared in 2016, obviously we look at fees, investment tools, let's see, creditworthiness, references from other governmental clients. So obviously there are different things. We've had experiences in the past prior to PSLAF where you start a relationship with the bank, they have this great investment model, and we had an experience where our auditors found that some of the things they were investing in were not allowed by Act 72. So I think, local banks are more savvy or attuned to what Act 72 requires, but with PSLAF, they're all about safety is first, and liquidity and yield.
What percentage of school districts typically invest with PSLAF?
I think, I don't know the percentage. I don't know that off the top of my head. So, and the other issue, from the other perspective, local banks, would they like to have our business? Would Fulton like to have our business? Sure. But we did send an RFP and those are the results. Would BB&T want it? They all throw their hat in there. But really from, it would be an administrative hardship right now. If you prefer just another year extension or 2 year. But I don't think it's...
What kind of a balance do we typically maintain? What kind of a balance do you typically maintain?
Maintain in where?
In the PSL. What's
Right, currently it's higher, but their agreement is to get free fee, we invest 85%. So, but their rates are very comparable to what others are offering.
The CD is like 44.
Right, there's different CDs, there's collateralized CD pools. So, and again, it's investing 100% of the time. Nothing.
What would we have to do in terms of authorizing a delay? Do we need to do anything? Does it need to be voted on by the board?
Well, and the extension should probably be publicly approved, depending on if they're willing to extend it.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the first step, reaching out to them.
Yeah,
if the board, seeing what term they would want extended. Or do you want just 1 year? What's your preference?
My thoughts are due to the expectations, I think, that we have of the business office and the administration in general regarding some of the budget changes and also going through negotiations, as well as some of the administrative changes that you're talking about, Ann, that we would need, in my opinion, to delay it for a year is my preference to put down, because I think that way we don't kick it down too far, because we already have done 1 year extension, and have Ann contact them and put this on the agenda for March. That would be my preference.
And does that help you, 1 year?
Yes. We'd like to.
You mean the peace style, Lena, or do you mean 1 to 2?
2 years.
Has there ever been any notes from our auditors about these last?
Yeah.
Well, I'm okay with 2. My one concern is we already have done the 1 year extension.
If we ask for another year at this point, and after that year, we can't ask for another year? That your preference would be 2 now? Do you know what I mean?
I don't, it depends on their position at that point. I cannot, predict what they're going to say. When we asked for the 1 year, they said, we'd be willing to go longer if you'd like.
Oh, they did say that?
They did. So from that perspective, doing it 1 year at a time and assessing, well, where do we stand, this time next year? What's the condition of the business office?
Yeah. Well, why don't you ask them about it too, and then bring it to the meetings in March? Is that okay?
Yeah.
John, you cool with that?
Yep, absolutely.
Sweet. All right. Moving along. So we come to what is the board's role in the district's budget process? What this conversation is going to be based around are the goals that are displayed up here. There are 6 of them. This is something that the Business Functions Committee is going to pursue with the administration to try and achieve. These goals are goals. They're not lines in the sand, although those don't always then stay either. So what we're looking to do as an exercise this evening, and then get feedback from the members of the public that are here. I'm just asking that we try and be considerate of the fact that there is a large scope of discussion here, and we do have limited time. But my desire would be for us to go through down through one of these goals each, identify what work needs to be done, understand the goal better, to try and present information about how we're going to achieve that, or if we can achieve that. And then to identify whose responsibility those things are going to be. And the model that I sent around earlier is one based on Boards That Lead, which is a book that's published by the Harvard Business Review, and basically it splits things into 3 categories. Issues that the board leads on, issues that the board partners with the administration on, and issues that the board stays out of the way of. So those are really that's my desire for us to try and identify some action steps about how to understand and achieve these goals, and that will build the agendas for the rest of the year. So with that, I'll just open it up for discussion for this first goal. We'll pursue a budget that limits spending to $80 million. Just some background for folks who are here, and Ann, chime in anytime if I get anything wrong. We're currently at a preliminary budget, when last projected in December, that put us at about $82.1 million. So this represents a reduction somewhere in the ballpark of $2 million to $2 million plus, which is significant. And the administration has identified some concerns with that target. I think there's some concerns about whether that's achievable based on the consensus that the board will come to. I think the committee wanted to set a target that we're going to strive for. So how do you guys think that we can achieve that? What information do we need? What presentations do we need to have? What information do you need to get a hold of? How can we put some action steps around there to try and get to where we can?
Isn't it also that 80 million would require a budget increase of 1.7%? Isn't that?
So that would allow for, so this year's budget is $78.69 million, which the board approved this past year. So the increase from that amount to 80 million would be a 1.7% spending increase. We're not talking about revenues at this point, but I think that there would be a general idea or an expectation that revenues would be on the table for increasing for millage increases.
Yeah. And what's our action index currently?
3.3%.
3.3. And that's what we voted on, so we'll stay.
Stay within that.
I'll put it all on you, Ann, sorry.
Well, so it was a preliminary budget, and preliminary is preliminary.
Yeah.
And I have expressed concerns that we've just started, school districts that are just doing a proposed final, this is really when they get started.
Yeah.
We look at the preliminary. Right now, the school board doesn't have all the information. We haven't even gone through the presentations of special pupil services, special education. So there's a lot that has to be worked on.
And keep in mind, there are still 2 more presentations.
Right, so
Yeah,
one
to take place.
presentation. We also don't know what the governor is going to do. So we're building this budget at this point. So to come up with a target, I understand why, I really do, because you cannot stop deficit spending. You cannot have a structural deficit because it'll just erode all of your fund balance. So I think the board will continue to share information with the board, but recognizing we have to target something I don't know that that's achievable. I don't know that yet. We can work toward that.
I think the idea though is to do our best to get to that and be transparent as we're getting there. So the
Yeah.
board knows where.
We'll do our best to give as much information as we can about, impact of certain reductions. Whether those that are the low-hanging fruit, most probable, and those that are our worst case scenario. A lot of school districts are entrenched in a certain budget process, but when you're faced with, getting deficit spending, then you have to regroup, which is what we're doing now. And we're trying to do that with these community meetings. But it's going to take time in order to get everyone on board, get budget managers, administrators on board, because everyone's protecting what they have. And, staff is protecting what they have. The community, the parents are protecting what they have. So, it's going to be a real challenge.
So I think what I'm hearing from you, and you can definitely push back if you think it's necessary, is right now the administration needs time to develop a new picture that gets presented to the board at some point. So this,
To meet the goals that are up there, yes.
Presenting, where do we stand this year? Where do we, once we finish these last two budget meetings, what's it really looking like for 2021? And keep in mind, everyone, we're negotiating contracts too. And also, what does the new 5-year projection look like?
yeah.
So,
So in terms of action steps, kind of what I hear you saying, Ann, and what Bob's saying as well, is that you guys need time to update. You need time to update the 5-year budget projection. You need time to get at a more accurate preliminary budget, and you need time to fully get all the requests left from budget managers.
Not only the request, though, we need to put what we've heard in these budget sessions into what we're trying to do as far as reductions.
Okay. And that's something that the administration is going to drive, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we are collaborating to put all the information together from the first 2 sessions. We'll add in the other 2 sessions. I don't know if you want to talk about the last meeting to tight on at the end, but that will be the time for that to be presented.
So my, kind of where I think I hear you guys saying is, I'll write down those 3 things, the preliminary budget, getting the rest of the requests, and integrating the feedback that we've gotten from the community stakeholder meetings, and also getting a new preliminary budget together. And that's something that the board will stay out of the way of. And that's not something that we're going to expect to start getting reports on ASAP or anything like that. But as you guys are building up to it, we'll look at having additional meetings to really impact those. Is that fair?
yes. That's right.
John or Dave, do you guys have any concerns about that?
No, it's easy to sit here and ask for this stuff, but the administration, this team,
We'll put it together.
appreciate it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any penalties from the state if the fund balance dips below a certain percentage or,
From
you know,
the state, you want to talk about bonds, ratings, things like that?
like if we don't get the budget in order, where are the penalties from the state? Do they come in and take over?
I don't know at what threshold they would come in, but the other side of the school district's financial health is when they issue bonds for improvements, you're rated by Standard & Poor's. You get a bond rating, and that bond rating impacts the interest rate. And we've worked very hard in having to get a good bond rating, which we do. I save a lot of money in interest over the years. That impacts. So another reason that we need to control our spending, or try to get to a balanced budget is for that very reason as well. We can make deficits better.
Is anyone pulling money out of the fund balance continuously? As that gets lower, our bond rating will suffer.
But there's no penalties from the state that you, I've been in other states and some of them cap.
Sure.
Like if it gets to a certain.
The ultimate penalty is what you see going on in Harrisburg. They will come in and take over.
Yeah, right.
But we're not clearly close to that.
Okay.
And not even in our preliminary budget are we close to that. But, you know, we don't want to get close to that either.
No.
So I think, you know, I have what I wanted for the first goal. I think, go ahead.
I apologize. Is there a time frame on this first
For
goal?
which part? For the first goal? In terms of achieving the goal, you know, that would be something that needs to happen by June 30th, which is when the final budget needs to be adopted. In terms of us kind of enforcing and pursuing the goal, that would be something that we would have to wait for the administration. At least what I'm hearing is that we have to wait until we get a clear picture of what our projections are going to be at current basis, and then allow them to come back with some identified reductions within that too.
But I guess my question is, what is your time frame for that window? I mean, there's the last thing you want to do is wind up late to the game again, and then be back and forth.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, then instead of making educated decisions, sometimes you're forced to make rash decisions. It just seems like the administration should be held to a time frame, and if you're going to need time to, you know, counter and go back and forth, it just seems like that goal should be set up with some kind of
Do you
strategic
want to talk
date.
about your final?
Don't we have a budget calendar?
There is a budget calendar.
Yes.
I do have a budget timeline, and, you know, through March, administrator and stakeholder meetings will decide on budget reductions. And again, I'll reiterate that this is a new process for this district, and it's going to take time to get it right. There will be some angst. We're doing our best to include stakeholders, gather consensus, but you saw in those meetings that everybody wants to keep what they have.
Of course, that's
So, you know,
normal.
it's going to be a delicate situation. You know, what we'll do is to try to provide as much information to the board and to the community on, you know, the impact of suggested, you know, reductions. We have to refine our timeline. You know, when are we going to really? This timeline I did in the fall, starting with meetings to the board in March, but we need to work on that.
Do you think that, you know, we talked about the budget town hall in our meeting ahead of time, trying to create a public meeting basically where we would be exclusively addressing presentation on the budget and then also receiving feedback from the community. Do you think that it would be possible to try and have those completed by a town hall in early April?
We definitely, yeah, that's a good target because in May is when the board has to adopt a proposed final budget on May 12th.
And that gives us time to incorporate those last two meetings as well. I mean, we're going to start working on this now, but that will give us a chance to incorporate what we have in those two meetings.
If John, you're okay with this, can we identify a time on the calendar for April, early April, probably before the workshop meeting? We'll integrate some of the committee's work and then also maybe a discussion portion for the board to give feedback similar to how we just did with the first two stakeholder meetings at that workshop meeting. And then we'll really unveil the full product as it is, stands at that point. Because we're always going to have revisions that are going to happen in the last 2 months, but that's going to be the base work of the 5-year projection, the preliminary budget, and start to detail some of the cuts that administration came up with.
All right, we'll look at dates, we'll look at facility, we'll look at conflicting events.
Okay.
In early April, I agree.
Okay, yeah, so, and then I'm identifying that one just to keep with my process, because I really like that book. That'll be an issue that the administration will focus on.
likely the middle of April. For the holiday.
Okay. Now, the second goal plays into this in a significant way. The second goal, the district will work toward limiting the budget increase in this year's budget, or this coming budget, of wages and benefits to $800,000. Currently, the projected increase is about $2.3 million. So it would have implications that some serious reductions in cost would be in that. Now, I think we had some discussion ahead of time about that's a target that we want to strive for. We understand that there's flexibility in there and that may not be achievable, so we want to hear that. But do you think that it's okay to start identifying how you're meeting that goal and some of the cuts that you guys identified through that process of that town hall meeting?
What we're aware of right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think this will be a rolling, you'll be updated as we go with more information that we're provided through either the sessions or, in case of attrition, retirements, and things like that.
So with retirements and attrition, we're going to have a clear picture of that before April. Would that be fair to say? Or I'm sorry,
More than
we'll have a clear picture of
February is when
retirements.
we were talking about retirement.
So do you think that we could have a conversation ahead of time, probably business functions, about some attrition considerations that you guys are working through?
We'll know where we are by then, yes.
Okay. Okay. So does it seem reasonable for that to be a conversation at the March meeting?
Yes.
That's at that point where we have, yes.
So that, I think,
Possibility for things to increase slightly after that, but pretty close number.
okay, and then, so that's one that we're going to partner on. The third goal, the district will explore goals basis for select departments and use of measurements or ROIs underneath those goals. So this is probably the most brand new suggestion in here, and we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more in depth after we're done with the goal setting conversation to introduce this idea. And I know that Joe, you have some experience, so maybe if you want to briefly talk about that at the end when we're at that point. I think my hope would be is to start doing some more research and maybe some brainstorming on the administration's end, and then maybe also making this a subject of that March meeting. Is that reasonable to you guys? And then maybe or we can prioritize that introductory conversation now, and maybe give you a better idea of where my thoughts are, or where
Before we commit,
questions
a
are.
little bit more.
Okay, so.
So you're talking high level.
Yeah, so my thoughts are for this, a goals-based budget is basically saying your staff or your budget managers identify the goals that they want to try and meet in their department. So I'm just throwing out an example, I'm not seriously suggesting this at this point, but let's say the library department really wants to try and identify the reason that they're spending money in the different areas that they are to goals. So let's say one of the goals for them is to increase readership. So they want to identify how staff is now going to use their time to have readership increase or whatnot and push more book assignments or something along those lines. I'm making this up as I go, so
I hear you.
have mercy on me. So then in a goals-based budget, they would identify staff time or salary or wages underneath that portion. So that's a very specific example. Underneath those goals, you would have measurements, or as an industry, they're called ROI, or return on investment. And basically the idea is we're going to measure our success about meeting these goals with empirical evidence, it's not subjective evidence, it's quantitative evidence. And we're going to identify our success in meeting those goals. The fundamental idea behind this is to have a better system of accountability for especially new spending, and for the administration to assess current spending and how effective that's really being for educating students.
Understood. That also implies, the new spending, current staffing, current limits, or I mean, because we go down to the bottom and we're talking about increased no greater than each of the prior year.
Well, and I think where the board's going to have to be cognizant, and I'll just use an example, if we did decide that we didn't want to continue with,
Technology, go with that. That's what we heard the suggestions.
yeah, but I wanted to use the curriculum example that Patrick, you've been working through. Yeah, what, is it investigations or, okay, so let's say we wanted to move away from investigations. The new program, the new curriculum that we're going to use, we would attach ROI or goals-based budgeting to, so that we're measuring the success of that new program as we're going through that. So to address your point most directly, I think this would be a long-term thing more than just this year.
Okay.
And for this year, I would love to try and figure out a way to model it. If we can't do that, I don't think that's a huge problem, but I think we have to have some mechanism where we're assessing that new spending especially, but also that we can apply to some of the current areas where we're curious about or really questioning, is that as effective as we really think it
I
is?
understand what you're asking.
Before I turn it over to you guys, Joe, I know you've had experience with this in your building. Do you just want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so...
Can we hear you, who you are? And
oh, hi, yeah, sorry. So my name's Joe Hepp. I'm a resident here in Exeter. My current career is I'm a high school principal of Springfield High School in Delaware County. I've been in that building now for 10 years. You know, Hunter and I had the occasion the other night at the curriculum committee to talk about a few things, and we were kind of dialoguing back and forth about programs and you know, return on investment, which, you know, a question I posed to you was, you know, if we're using a particular program, or if we're not using a particular program because it doesn't necessarily meet the needs and the time, you know, how much are we spending on that? Is it necessary to continue it? And I think that's what prompted Hunter to share this article with me. So and to speak to Hunter's point, this notion of return on investment is something that, you know, I as a building principal in our district, you know, we're constantly examining how we're allocating resources as it relates to our student achievement and our gains. So we're always looking at how much money, you know, we're spending versus you know, the bang for the buck, essentially. So we're very critical about it. You know, I don't want to necessarily speak in specifics, but you know, we one thing, for example, that's brought up in this article is professional development, teacher effectiveness. So, you know, we're very, I would say we're very conservative, if that's a good word, in how much we spend on professional development, because, you know, we've developed kind of like a homegrown internal professional development model, and we don't spend don't spend a considerable amount of money on professional development. That's just one example. And we have had pretty good success with that, so, you know, we keep our spending down. I just wanted to comment on something that Ms. Geider said, which was, you know, this have mindset that a lot of us have. You know, certainly I have a lot of things, you know, in my job that I really want to hold on to. But I think that Hunter's presentation of this article and this idea really speaks to it. You know, there's this notion of we have things, but if we have things that aren't necessarily effective and they aren't necessarily moving us toward our goal, they're distracting us from reaching our goal, or perhaps even hindering us from reaching our goal, and we're using them for the simple fact that we're investing in them and we're spending good money on them, then it's worth, you know, looking at the haves to say, okay, I have something, but is it necessarily a need, and is it a necessity, and is it benefiting the organization? So, you know, as I shared with you, I think there's some really good principles of approach in this article here to begin to reframe the, you know, how we look at our spending, how we look at what we're willing to invest our time and energy and resources in. And, you know, from leading a building as a principal and being a teacher, you know, oftentimes teachers will gravitate toward the next best thing because I think they think that that's what's going to help them to do better. But you can also confuse and you can distract teachers by putting too many things in front of them and thinking that they have to meet all these expectations when, you know, just a few really strategic things. And I think Allison brought this up at the last meeting, you know, just a few really powerful, effective strategic things could reduce spending and really get you on focus and on track. So that's kind of like my experience in a nutshell.
Thank you. Does anybody want to react to that quick before the committee members come back to try and identify if we want to move forward with this at all? And maybe express some of your concerns and then how we want to do that. So I do want to open it up to anybody if you want to react to that from any of the group we have here.
I think we do, actually. This is part of, at least the technology process. You know, when we are at the point of building the budget for the upcoming year, we go out and actively look at, you know, usage and just try and get some feedback from the end users and the principal, and see if, you know, sort of gauge its effectiveness, if it's being helpful. You know, and we sort of weed that through the process, and I know we have lots of distracting technologies, you know, that might be used by this department or that department, and you know, it's cheaper to buy them for the whole organization sometimes than to buy it for a subdivision of the organization. So we have resources that, you know, I think we spend time, and it's definitely worth everyone looking at what are the things that we're using, what is their effectiveness. Sometimes we get sort of criticized for not following up on, you know, 2 years out, how successful is it, we just keep renewing it, and then at some point we forget, we just renew and we don't really reevaluate it. So I think it's a very worthy goal.
Once you use a software to assess the technology use on devices,
So
isn't it something like, I think Bytes, isn't it?
Talking about Bright Bytes.
Right,
Yeah,
Bytes.
and actually what's interesting with that is we were using it, and speaking of the return on investment conversation, myself and Joe and Dan and Missy sat down, we looked at the data that it was giving us. To some extent, it was data that we kind of knew already, even anecdotally, and we came to the conclusion that we could do our own internal surveys using Google Forms that don't cost anything in lieu of having to spend, I think it was $18,000 for a 3-year contract for Bright Bytes. And so we, you know, once the contract expired, we just said, we're not using Bright Bytes anymore, because we knew that we could get that same information in other ways more effectively. And so, I mean, that's actually a really good example of what you're talking about.
So it sounds to me like we have some internal experience, maybe not in this specific name, but definitely with the process.
We do it some curriculum as well.
Could we, yes, go ahead.
So I work with return on investment. I'm in sales, so it's kind of, you know, if we don't have return on investment, we don't have sales.
Yeah.
So, and I love that concept. Seems like there's a gray area when you come into this. I love the idea, but I love the word feedback because it represents people's opinions, but feedback is not a good representation, in my opinion, of ROI. It has to be objective metrics. That's just how I see things. I can tell you that in my company, we also overlapped ROI with MBOs this year, so we did metric-based objectives. So a certain employee every month would have to submit a metric-based objective. Now when you add that to it, it gives a bit of subjectivity to it because they get to provide an explanation on how they're meeting their objective. But while we may be using some of those resources, I think the nice thing about ROI is that it is specific, in my experience anyway, to a metric. And if you don't have a metric and it becomes subjective, then all of a sudden the water becomes gray, and you can make, it's very easy when it's opinion-based or feedback-based to make things look maybe better than they actually are, especially like we were talking about with budgets earlier. We're all going to protect our money, so we're going to make our programs look as good as they can in order to protect our investment. So I would just suggest that if you do go forward with it, that you have very specific metrics in order to meet those standards.
Yeah. Well, real quick before I turn it over to Dave and John, or if anybody else wants to chime in, we do have about 14 minutes left because I want to get out of here at 6:55. And I know that has a chilling effect on how long people are going to talk, but we do have a few more things that we want to get through, so turn it over.
Just quick, Joe, do you have a methodology to set up your criteria for ROI?
Well, I mean, we'll look at, no, I mean, it's very challenging in what is our return? Is Is our PSSA
Right.
scores? Is it? So that's a very challenging component in at least our area. But when we're looking at software, we're looking at, usage speaks volumes. If the product is not being universally used, it's very easy to see that, okay, if no one in third grade is using this product and its primary focus is third grade, then we need to evaluate why are we using this product. So we do look at, logs usage, those types of details, and present that during the process of, is this something we need to continue moving forward? Is it something we need to, is it because of lack of professional development? Do we need to spend time getting people out with the teachers in the classrooms, introducing the topic or showing, co-teaching, whatever? That's sort of the way that we implement, new technologies, new software.
I think we would want to reach out to you and to others in the organization. How do you set up the criteria to say, here's how we're going to measure ROI in this area, in this area, in this area? And whatever you could provide us would be very helpful. I don't mean tonight, but
right. So,
over the term.
Dr. Winters was talking about Bright Bites, and Bright Bites was, it was brought to us from the board, and Dr. Davies moved it forward. He wanted to implement Bright Bites as a tool because it showed, it was professionally built surveys, and they went out and they asked students for student feedback, teacher feedback, how they rate themselves, how they rate the district, and it was tied to like it was an interesting, they did a technology and learning model, and a couple of other different models, and they were all around the sort of educational technology versions of ROI. So it gave us some of what we were looking at, but it didn't give us, what we found was because it was professionally, there were lots of questions that just weren't relevant to us as an organization. So, and we couldn't tailor those questions, and those questions would give us a low rating if it was something that we ideologically didn't do in this district. So it just didn't have a real fit, but we do spend a lot of time looking at data.
I guess the caution I would advance is that we want to establish ROI criteria that tell us what we need to hear, not what we want to hear. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the model, obviously designed to have more of an industry corporate use, and it's interesting to see how it's being applied in the education setting. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around how we take some of the soft assessments that we have to do and kind of put those into a metric process. I think if there are some examples out there, like Joe's describing, if we know districts that are using this effectively, it would be nice to try to find out how are they integrating metrics into their decision-making process. And, I don't know how much it's going to yield this year, but I like the model, going forward, as something that we have to be integrated into our system so that we can always keep an eye on our efficiencies.
If it's acceptable to you guys, what I'd like to do is the brainstorming around this, I think, is probably something that we want to partner with the administration on at our March meeting. And then if the administration is willing, could you come up with some examples where we've used this in the district and maybe do some research as well on some districts some districts that have something like this model, and bring it and lend that to our conversation that we'll have in March.
Absolutely. I wonder if BCIU would have some information about districts and these.
Well, I can reach out to the superintendents.
Moving on to goal number 4, the district will pursue the implementation of classroom floor policy. Generally speaking, what this does is it creates a standard under which the district, and most often, or if not always, it's going to apply to the secondary level. The district will not run a class that has up to X amount of students. Say that's 10, say that's 12, say that's 15. So if you have 14 students on a 15 classroom floor, you would not run a class. Part of the way that you would counteract this There's a couple of different ways, but one of them that has been mentioned that we have in our survey responses, and that I've heard from the administration as well, is staggering classes so that you offer them every other year, every fourth year, so that you create the demand that one year, so that students would want to funnel themselves into that class because it's being offered this one time. The idea underneath this classroom floor policy is to get a better handle on what we're offering at the secondary level, especially as it relates to staffing. I think that there's probably a tremendous amount of conversation and work that would have to go into this, and it may not be achievable to be applied for this next budget as well. So my hope, and after I kind of advanced this thought, I'd love to open it up for a conversation. My hope is that what we would do is we would have a conversation about this at our February meeting for business functions, that this would be the subject of that meeting almost entirely, pending anything that may come up in between then, and that the administration would be able to present us with some models that other districts use, because this is applied within the county. And the governor one actually has a really good policy that I saw no issues with, but I know that you guys are smarter than I am. So I think that there's some room that we can start working on, and then if we could get some idea, and I know that you probably won't be able to get firm numbers, but if you want to, would you be able to try and model the impact that this, generally speaking, would have on the budget or on staffing levels? I'm asking you about whether that's possible, so I don't want to push that on you.
I don't want to throw numbers at something that hasn't been fleshed out in terms of changing, as Patrick has said early on in the budget process. You have to blow up the schedule and redo a schedule. You really need to start that in August or July. And you need to have conversations with your secondary administrators, because there's implications of where you're going to put the kids.
Sure.
So what are they going to do?
We've had these discussions already with Mr. Campbell, Mr. Flamm, so we can bring a little more intensity to try and get something for you. I don't know if, as Ed said, we're going to be able to give you anything more.
Okay. Senior high school is, they're taking a difficult step. I was talking to Mr. Hepp about this earlier. They cloned their schedule to start building next year's schedule. They didn't bring the meets with them, so they're basically going to start their scheduling based on student requests. And so this is not just copying and cloning and filling what we've done before. So there's lots of, and this is a very hard process. So they've been talking about it. And like Ann said, it's something you start in August. They've been in a chipboard, and they're really trying a couple of different ways of getting the best schedule they can. And
I'm sure they already do it to some degree now. I mean, there must be some classes that are where there's only very limited interest, and they just don't run the class, right? So, I mean, to me, it's a matter of just establishing, what that threshold is per class. I mean, just take a look at it. We probably haven't know what their history is of having lower enrolled classes. So I just wonder if this won't apply to all classes. I'm sure. I mean, there's electives and probably certain electives.
So you could use somewhat of a, kind of a phasing process as well, that, if there are electives that, say you've got a student that's a junior and they're taking a certain, sequence of courses, maybe it's in the science area, that, you phase and you kind of do your floor policy to where the next incoming freshman class comes in, that over the course of those, 4 years, I know the district that I currently reside in their course catalog, their Soaring Eagle document, for all of their electives, like it specifically says, available, and it gives the years. So that if you're an incoming freshman, you know that sociology might be available your sophomore year, then it won't be available again until your senior year. And it's marked as such so that parents know and kids know, and you can plan accordingly. And then what they do is in the year when it's not offered in the building, they find a way to operate online. And so
we are running out of time, Greg. I know you had a comment.
Yeah, my name's Greg Galtier. I'm a retired middle school principal. And based on what he said about what the high school's doing, they're really kind of putting in their own classroom floor policy. If if they're going to take a look at requests and use that to determine what classes they're running. So they're looking at meeting the needs of the students as best they can. I think if you take a look at this, the other thing you need to factor in is one is safety, because different classes, when you're using equipment, can be dangerous. If you get the classes too big and you gotta look at the space the class is in. And then the other thing you want to take a look at is district priorities. How important are AP classes versus honors classes versus regular classes? Because, you know, AP may not get a lot of kids signing up for them, but how important are those AP classes to the district? You know, so those are just things that you need to think about. I don't have the answers, I'll just throw out the questions.
So I think I hear some challenges with trying to, I mean, this obviously will have a financial impact. I think we have some challenges with identifying what that is without more detail. And I guess what I'm wondering out loud is this may be a better conversation to start a curriculum. Are there things that we can talk about in business functions that would be helpful? Because I don't know, now that I'm thinking about this and hearing some feedback, if there's really conversation that would be of value for us to work on.
I can certainly start at curriculum committee level.
And I think Mr. Campbell, Mr. Flam, being part of that would be good. I mean,
Okay.
you know, kind of what you had said, we've had numerous conversations with Mr. Campbell, kicking this idea around. So he has taken steps already to try and go where we've asked him to go.
Okay. Are you comfortable with doing that?
If I can, you know, well, I think to Dr. Phillips' point, I'd almost want to sit down with Mr. Flam and Mr. Campbell first,
Okay.
and kind of, you know, organize, you know, is there a way through the discussion of the storing legal document at the February meeting to share some information, at least some preliminary information in that particular area. So I can make an arrangement to meet with them prior to that meeting and at least have some information to start the conversation in February.
Do you want to say anything about that, Greg?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about, is the state enacting something about an internship program, or is that something new that anybody has heard about at the high school level
As a requirement.
as a requirement?
I've not heard of any requirement, and there's some funding being put out to try and support it. We don't have an internship coordinator.
Okay.
We've had a person, when I first got here, I believe she was getting a stipend for $2,500. She was a retired teacher.
Okay.
She's now working with grandchildren, good for her. So we've pieced together what we can do for that. It's been recognized, ironically, at a meeting this morning at the BCTC. That's a big move that we're trying to do. They are actually going to have a program where they will provide some of that internship through grant money. But I've not heard that it's been a mandate.
Okay, not mandated yet. Just, I've heard a little bit actually about another school district hiring an internship coordinator. And
Oh,
they're
absolutely.
saying that like a large chunk of students will be actually leaving the building to do this internship.
Absolutely.
And if, I was just wondering if that starts to happen, you know, that's gonna open up space as well. So,
Well, and then that ties into our I mean, there's a lot of virtual, you know, you can have kids out on internships, still take classes through virtual, you know, and then there's, you know, but no.
okay, I wasn't sure. I just
Not
heard that
mandate,
and I
but
didn't
it's
know.
been something that we've been trying to cobble together because we don't have a full-time internship coordinator. But that does open up possibilities of getting students. There were seniors out into the workforce.
Real
There
quick.
was an article in the Talent, our internship program. It's apparently just getting started.
Yes.
A couple of examples of students who.
Yep. But not to the level that we're talking about here, which stages.
So on this, I'm going to wait to hear back from you, Patrick, where your timeline is. I want to try and really go through these quickly. Technology procurement, if this is not going to, if the classroom floor policy is not going to be on the February agenda, do you guys think that you could identify, expand on some of the technology procurement requests and present that at the February meeting?
Technology procurement meaning,
New devices, refresh,
okay.
and really, I think that's the biggest area that we hear, we've
Not
heard from the
priority.
community, and we want to try and understand that better, I think, before we really, before some of us pile on to technology. I think it's probably a better thing that we understand that much better. Is that possible to really expand on that? And I'll give you
And
some
to be clear, you
more
say
details.
pile on to remove or reduce.
Yes, that's what I was getting at, so.
But no, we haven't.
And also understanding how technology is really driven by how curriculum has changed.
Yes.
And, you know, it's
Yeah.
firmly entrenched in how children get.
That would be something that the administration is going to lead on and prepare some presentations and some discussion. And Patrick, I'm guessing you want to be a part of that with the curriculum aspects that are influencing that technology use that we can kind of talk about for February. And then the last one, the district will restrict budget managers to increase no greater than 10% of the prior year increase in their budget areas. This is one that I'm a little bit more inclined to think that the board might be willing to say, and I don't want to overstep my bounds, so I want to open this up to discussion, and maybe if other board members want to chime in here, that this would be something we say as an expectation. We expect that no budget manager is going to submit a new budget request with an increase of 10% over what they had last year. I'm comfortable with that. I don't know what the other board members in here think. I know we don't want to commit to anything because we do have a quorum right now. But I guess I kind of want to understand if we need to talk about that more, or if that's something that we're kind of sending as a message.
I just know like one area is like special education, it's very difficult to predict what your costs are going to be, and it's really hard to contain costs because some of the programming is, you know, absolutely embedded in, you know, mandates and requirements, and very difficult to scale back. But outside of human services and special education, you're ready to go.
Outside, I think we've either held or got below budgets the last few years. So I don't believe that's going to be an issue at all, with the exception of the special education and pupil services.
I'd be concerned though with somebody saying, oh, well, I can do that, I don't have to go over 10%. You want really to do that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, that's been the expectation year by year here. But when we've met with them, it's not a, you have an opportunity to increase by 10%. It's, why are we increasing it all? If you can, almost a return investment discussion.
So how about to try and meet this goal, if there are any budgets that are going to be requested above that threshold, that we expressly talk about?
Yes,
And
that
why?
makes sense. And we have those.
Okay, folks, our next meeting is going to be the 18th of February before the voting meeting. I appreciate you coming, and
Right on time.
let the show begin in 3 minutes.